Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going right through the summer. We are not taking a break because that ever-moving Liberal agenda is doing just that. We need to push back. So with this content, we ask that you like, subscribe, comment, share this program. And together we can do that. Of course, please tell your friends. If you can't listen or watch the entire program right this second, you can download it, listen to it on platforms like Castbox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it, it is out there. Today, another great show lined up for you. We are talking cost of living. We are talking that incredible ArriveCan app. And with those topics, we have two friends of the show coming back again. We have Michael Barrett, the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, a beautiful province of Ontario, is also the critic for health. Joining him, right beside him, is Greg McLean, the Member of Parliament for Calgary Centre, also the critic for natural resources. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming.
It's a pleasure.
All right, let's talk about the health mandate. So we have new measures announced for unvaccinated Canadians. They are now allowed to travel internationally and domestically, finally, after months of pressure by yourself and other colleagues trying to get this fixed. But there are still hurdles they have to go through, including potential quarantine when they arrive back from an international location.
Right. Yeah, so this is something that our Conservative team has been fighting. We've been fighting against these vaccine mandates, certainly over the last year, through the last election, and we've put a lot of pressure on the government to simply just show us what the data is that they've been using to keep these mandates in place. These are the same mandates that they use to lay off, suspend, fire federal public servants, including the RCMP, and really it's been a situation where Canadians haven't been able to take a plane, they haven't been able to take a train, and so it didn't matter what their situation was. It could have been, a compassionate circumstance to just a happy one to see to reunite with their family for the birth of a child, or or a sad and somber occasion like saying goodbye to someone, a celebration of life or a funeral. The government hasn't relented up until this point, and so they have suspended or paused these mandates for now, saying that they might bring them back in the future. So our work isn't done. But what this means right now is that Canadians do not have to show proof of vaccination to travel domestically on those federally regulated, transportation modes like flying and trains. And when they return to Canada, they still are subjected to quarantine requirements, testing requirements. And when you're traveling by plane, of course, everyone, vaccinated or not, is still going to have to wear a mask. So we continue to challenge the government for the science, though, Jamie. It's very...
Well, the science changed everywhere else except in the federally regulated jurisdictions in Canada.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the top public health officers in all of the provinces said it was safe to lift those mandates, and showed the modeling that they needed the benchmarks that they needed to hit to be able to lift those mandates, and the federal government has refused to share any of the data. So we don't know what the conditions were that required them to stay in place, and we don't know what the conditions that were met that saw them lifted. So the fact that they're suspending them with the threat of reimposing them, we don't know at what time that might happen.
But ArriveCan stays for now.
So Arrive can, and a lot of people say Arrive can't, because it is it's not friendly to travelers. It's not friendly to our tourism sector. I can tell you, I've got a couple duty-free stores at the land border crossings in my riding. They field all kinds of calls from folks who are saying, "Well, what's this requirement, and how do I use that app?" But you know what? Never mind. We're gonna stay stateside. So this is having a real impact on people who are wanting to travel to Canada. It's having a real impact on border communities, on our tourism sector, and it's just more red tape from the government. It makes the job harder for our CBSA officers who are there to keep us safe, not to just keep in place unscientific tools that have been imposed by the governments and arbitrarily left in place.
Okay, we're talking transportation. Now we're talking vehicular traffic. Cost of gasoline is absolutely through the roof. And I note here, the province of Alberta has the lowest price right now at $1.89 per litre. Congratulations. That's because your Premier had the foresight to reduce some taxes temporarily. We don't have the same benefit here in Canada.
14 cents a litre came off in Alberta, and we could reduce that by another 60 cents if you think about all the taxes that go on gases across Canada. So about 209 is the last I saw is the average price in Canada. We expect that to go up through the summer as, of course, supply is constrained and demand will go up as people drive for vacations. It is a formula.
The biggest question we get in there, why we have lots of oil here in Canada, why can we not somehow bring the price down? What's the answer to that? We get it all the time.
We are constrained by our infrastructure, how we actually supply that oil. We're actually even discouraging the industry most of the time from actually producing more oil. That actually leads to, of course, production. Oil comes out of the ground, then you've got to process it into actually finished goods. So gasoline, diesel, airline fuel. But that happens often stateside and is brought back into Canada. We have a division in Canada between where we produce the oil and where we consume the oil. A lot of our production in Western Canada goes south of the border. Some of that comes back north to supply refineries in Canada, but also all our consumers in Canada get American processed gas. So if you think about Pearson Airport, most of that supply of aviation fuel comes from refineries south of the border. So it's not a strict equation, but we are seeing a reduction in refining capacity across North America. And that is because governments in both jurisdictions, Canada and the United States, have told the industry, we don't want you producing as much. We see less demand going forward from a more or less structural point of view. How does industry adjust to that when the demand that they see is increasing? And the only thing that can happen, of course, is lower supply, higher demand. You tell me what happens to price.
Absolutely, always goes up. Well, that's the biggest issue. The government now is noticing it's politically bad for them to have high gas prices, but at the same time, they, for decades, have come up with policies that have hampered the ability for these companies to get their product to market. European, Asian, even the United States, as you know, Joe Biden, the first thing he did was kill Keystone XL, which would have been quite helpful right now with the price of gasoline in the United States. There are other nations that can't up their production, just like you said, to offset what's happening in Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah, and the narrative around Europe has always been we need to price gasoline higher so that alternative energies look more attractive from a cost perspective. In the last 6 months, or since the war in Ukraine, you've watched that come crashing down. The Europeans now are taking 20 billion euros less from their consumers in taxes. In Canada, at the same time, we've ramped it up, so we're taking 2.5 billion more from consumers in Canada. It makes no sense. Our approach on this is backwards vis-a-vis the rest of the world.
Absolutely. So going back to the health part, this is where it kind of ties in, and the tourism. We're having people stopped at the border coming from the United States that are just getting fed up with the ArriveCan app. We have high gas prices, high fuel prices, whether it be planes or vehicles. You live in a tourist town. You represent tourist agents. This is just another kick to an industry that has been down and out for the last 2 years.
Well, absolutely. It's been one thing after another, and we heard Mr. Trudeau say that the pandemic's not over, and so they're going to keep these measures in place. Well, it hasn't relented for our tourism sector, and they continue to suffer under painful regulations and rules put in place and policies put in place by the Liberals. And so on gasoline, it's been punishing, and it will be a punishing summer for folks who depend on people to get in their car and enjoy, in my case, the province of Ontario, to come to Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes, which, as you know, it's beautiful country. Mm-hmm. And the ArriveCan app and the policies at our border, the requirement for proof of vaccination for American travelers coming into Canada, it's going to continue to hamper that tourism that we rely on, frankly. And so it's going to be another tough summer, frankly, for people that operate in the tourism space. It's going to be a tough summer for people in my community. And they're looking for some action, some compassion from the government. You know, we know that the official opposition has put forward, Canada's Conservatives have put forward concrete proposals that would give Canadians a break and would also, encourage some of that traveling. And for Americans who would come to Ontario or come across to Canada, who would overcome the ArriveCan app and that bureaucracy, who did make a choice to get vaccinated and have that proof of vaccination, well, once they get into Canada, they're going to see gas prices that are just absolutely unrecognizable to them. And when even the strength of the U.S. dollar against the Canadian dollar isn't making it worth their while, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to stay home this summer. So it's going to be really tough. The government has failed to take action on that. They want to talk about all other measures that they've put in place, billions and billions and billions of spending that's frankly further fueling the fire. I'd say throw gas on the fire, but
that's too expensive.
But I don't even think they can afford the gas. So it's going to be tough times.
Well, let's build on what Michael just said. Greg, I love talking finance with you as well. As Michael just said, they're fighting inflation with more spending. So it's like fighting cancer with more cancer. It just really doesn't make any sense when we're trying to bring down the cost, but they keep putting fuel on the fire.
And very indicative. And the next report on CPI comes out tomorrow, and we'll see how much that affects everything. But the big influence of that, of course, is fuel prices. Fuel prices are continuing to push inflation across Canada, and the government has in their toolbox something they can actually use to bring that down, because the two biggest contributors to inflation are employment and energy. And energy is continuing to be ramped up by this government. The costs are in the pocketbook at the end of the day. People are going to have to pay it, and that's going to be indicated in your inflation numbers through and through. How do you deal with that? You deal with it by reducing that amount as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see these prints. But this is a finance minister that is only starting to understand that she can't print money ad nauseum here. We're going to have to stop printing money in order to deal with these problems going forward. That is part of, and even the governor of the Bank of Canada, God bless him, if you will, he's actually even indicated that it is the fiscal problems at this point in time, not the monetary problems, that are holding back the fight against inflation. So you're going to see a disconnect here between different officials in the government coming forward. I'd like to see where that lands.
So we're talking high energy prices, mortgage rates are going up, seeing the price of groceries, everything's going up. People are they're noticing their paychecks aren't going as far. That means a cut down in discretionary spending. This is a very concerning path that the Liberals just don't seem to be concerned about at all.
Yeah.
And all the marks are here. Like the warning signs are right in front of us.
Right. They didn't seem to have a good read on it. Over the last year, we heard that we would not have inflation. We heard that the problems that we were experiencing were transitory. We've heard that everything's stable. They put all the right steps in place to take care of Canadians. They're going to tell you if you can't pay your mortgage and you're a single senior, don't worry, we cut your childcare costs for you. So it's very confusing messaging. We heard from the finance minister a week ago when she was talking to the richest Canadians in Toronto, that it was something we've heard from the Prime Minister. This is the desired effect, that even at a time when Canadians were struggling to make ends meet, they still increased the carbon tax because they wanted to continue to advance their that agenda. So the government is now saying that they're going to continue to rake in record profits. They claim it's to reduce the deficit, but we haven't seen evidence that they have any interest in that over the last 7 years. So it's going to be a tough year for Canadians, and the government really just doesn't seem to get it.
Well, they continue to hide behind events, if you will. So they had COVID, and they blew their brains out on spending during COVID, and we know that at least 1/3 of the spending they went into debt on had nothing to do with COVID. Yeah. And then they had the war in Ukraine, they're blaming, and they had the floods in BC, and all these things are saying that's the problem, that's the problem, that's the problem. We live in a world where we're going to continue to have problems going forward here. We have to start adjusting to a normal that says we don't keep spending money for the sake of spending money.
Well, that should have been a message we hopefully will get across to the Liberals at some point, because that's the main issue. They keep spending money they don't have. They keep coming up with new programs with money they don't have. And I think that's what Canadians, I think, are coming around to, that the government in large part created a lot of the crisis we are seeing right now. I think I'm hoping that more and more start to realize what is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a government that, as Greg said, thinks that the solution to the problems is to print money. They're very ideologically driven, very interested in impressing celebrities on the world stage. That's been Mr. Trudeau's, his primary objective. And when we've got real problems here in Canada, we saw that, him filling up his Instagram with photos with, celebrities in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. It defies reasoning. And while there's an energy crisis, that is caused by Russia's invasion and war in Ukraine. And there's an opportunity in Canada. We should see the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Environment Minister, the Natural Resource Minister on an international sales tour selling Canada as the most ethical, cleanest, responsible energy producer in the world. And we can sell it to you for many of them at a great price, with the strength of their currency against ours. And they're not doing that. And so what are we seeing instead? We're seeing countries like Germany who are taking nuclear offline and bringing coal-fired plants online. And all the while, we're not hearing from our government that they're going to come up with solutions to get LNG, to get our petroleum products to Tidewater, so that we can be a real player to get them off that Russian oil or conflict oil or unethical oil, but also to bring down global greenhouse gas emissions and to have it done with a product made in Canada that is made and extracted under the strictest environmental regimes in the world. And as well, we know that all the workers are treated with dignity. They have the human rights that are afforded to everyone in this country. And it's baffling. So we have an Instagram tour from the Prime Minister instead of a sales tour from the full federal cabinet that could really move the mark and make life better for Canadians at the same time.
I like that, an Instagram tour.
And let me add to that, because I hear that narrative of the Minister of Natural Resources as if we can just start exporting LNG and hydrogen as quickly as possible here. There's a gap between project actual proposal and building these things. And that gap is growing larger because of the regulatory burden that's been presented by this government over the past 7 years. Nothing is getting built here for good reason. They're not bringing capital in from overseas because nobody has line of sight on getting projects built.
That's right.
Now, if the Minister of Natural Resources wants to export Canadian resources, he's going to have to build the infrastructure to export that. That's going to take a long time. My sense is this government just wants all these problems to go away, so it doesn't actually have to deal with the reality that we can propose these solutions to the world. Those solutions aren't evident right now, and the rest of the world doesn't look at Canada as a supplier right now. We've missed the boat for 7 years on building that infrastructure, and the rest of the world is going, where were you? Because now we need you.
Right.
The time to actually build a defense system is not in the middle of a war. You build it ahead of time. You get prepared for what's coming. Now, Russia expanded its production of oil and gas by over 10%. It doubled as far as the supply to Europe goes over the last 7 years. And here we are in Canada sitting on our hands with all these resources and no way to get them to market. And that's a failure of the regulatory system. Ask anybody who was setting up all those projects in Canada for LNG, for pipelines, for getting oil offshore. Ask them why all those got canceled and they continue to get built in other parts of the world. That's a failure of this government.
How much further would we be ahead if Energy East was completed? Or even started? We would have been started already. Northern Gateway, among others. Keystone XL, if it was allowed to be finished. We would have the ability to help increase the supply that's desperately needed right now.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you think about all the infrastructure we needed to have built, and now it's being proposed to be built. We still have TMX, which is grossly over budget once the government got a hold of it.
Only because the government had to save it.
Well, the government came in because the government regulations is more or less what put it in peril in the first place. So they stepped in and they spent over $10 billion more than the private sector party actually had budgeted for building that. And it's just a twinning of a pipeline. There's barely any new route on that whole route. It is actually something that was very simple to do. Less than $8 billion is what Kinder Morgan proposed to have that built, and it's cost over $18 billion so far. We'll see where it ends up, but there's a whole bunch of process that's been built in there, regulatory process in particular, that's being put on the backs of Canadian taxpayers at this point in time. Is this going to be viable? Yes, it is, because we still have a differential that we receive on Canadian oil, because we only have one customer. Getting our oil to Tidewater is a very important part of diversification of the Canadian energy system. Now that's important. So you think about 99% of our oil right now, our exports go to the United States. Once TMX is built, we'll have a bunch of it going to Tidewater, available for other parties, whether they'll take it or not, because a lot of it will be swallowed up by our neighbor to the south, and your closest customer, of course, is your best customer often. but it'll give us a bit of a pricing advantage, which we think equates to about $6 billion more on a differential basis for Canadian oil. And that's fantastic. I mean, that's money we're throwing away right now. It's going into the pockets of United States refiners and the United States government that collects tax on it. So it's a big bonus, but we need a lot more of that, obviously. We need more infrastructure in Canada to get our resources to market.
I was absolutely shocked when you told me that government bungled the project that they took control of. I can't believe that's possible. Yeah. We're just running out of time, so as you know, I always give the guests the final word. So, Michael, why don't I start with you? The floor is yours.
Well, you know, we've had a busy few months, really pressing the government for for the science, for the numbers behind what they've been doing with respect to mandates, and they've obfuscated. They haven't given us that information. But we've put enough pressure on them, and that pressure was really amplified with the voices of Canadians, people who are concerned about the effects that these mandates were having. And so Conservatives continue to fight for Canadians, and we're going to keep doing that throughout the summer. So the House of Commons has risen for the year, but when it comes back in the fall, it will be with months of Conservative advocacy on the behalf of Canadians that has happened in the meantime. So I look forward to continuing to fight, with our Conservative team for Canadians, because Canada needs a champion, and sadly we don't see that in Mr. Trudeau's government.
And I also give you and the team credit for your continual work on showcasing what a disaster our airports are, especially Pearson International. Yeah. So, Greg.
Well, it's been an interesting winter-spring session here, and you look at how much the Liberals want this to end at this point in time, because everything we've said for years now is coming to pass for them. World security is a big problem for them. They want that to go away, because we've said you've got to start preparing for the future here. Energy security is front line for all these people at this point in time, particularly with our allies in Europe. We've been saying this for a long time. Inflation is mounting like crazy. Liberals don't want to deal with this. The solutions are there for them. We've proposed those solutions, and they're not taking it up at this point in time. It's only a matter of time before people start saying, there's a party here putting forward viable solutions for the problems we're facing in Canada and the world, both from an economic perspective, a security perspective, and an environmental perspective. And the Liberals are not approaching those at all right now. I don't know if it's because it's not in their backyard that they haven't thought this up, but I do think there's an agenda here that we are ahead of, and we are going to continue to press these points going forward.
Well, the NDP wants to tax excess profits on the oil and gas industry, which will only do what? Increase the price of fuel.
One taxpayer at the end of the day.
It is absolutely unbelievable. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I have so many more questions and more conversation, but unfortunately, we only have so much time. So I appreciate your being here today. Of course, Michael Barrett, the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes, also the critic for health. Beside him is Greg McLean, Member of Parliament for Calgary Centre and also the critic for natural resources. We hope you like the content. If you do, please like, comment, subscribe, share it. Together we can push back against that ever-moving Liberal agenda. Again, tell your friends about it, because you can download it, listen to it at your convenience. Platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, you name it. It is out there. We will be back next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time with new content for you. Until then, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.